Western Europe. What do we know about it? A stable economy, the European Union, or LGBTQ pride? But did you know that more than 100 years ago, the Western Front of World War I was the bloodiest war at that time, which claimed the lives of millions of people? Well, let's fast forward to December 1916. Robert Nivelle became commander-in-chief of the French army instead of Joseph Joffre, who developed a new plan for the attack of French troops on the Noyon Ledge. English Prime Minister Lloyd George supported Nivelle, instructing him to command the British troops in a joint operation. The German command became aware of Nivelle's plan, but since the Germans were not fools, they prepared powerful fortifications to protect the front, the same Hindenburg Line. On March 17, 1917, the Germans completed the transfer of troops to a new line of defensive, and on April 6th, the United States of America abandoned its position of neutrality and declared war on Germany. But let's rewind some time and find out how it all happened. Back at the beginning of the war, Germany began unrestricted submarine warfare, but after the sinking of the Lusitania and the Arabic, there was some danger of the United States entering the war, so submarine warfare was changed to be waged only against warships. But then, according to the plans of the German command, the ground forces were supposed to go on the defensive, while at sea it was decided to start unrestricted warfare again. Its goal was an economic blockade of Great Britain. In March 1917, German submarines sank 3 American merchant ships. The then US President Woodrow Wilson, supported by public opinion, declared war on Germany on April 6th. But everyone in the world understood that the main reason for the US joining the Entente's side was a desire to take part in the upcoming division of the warlord, as the US was 100% going to win. As for the submarine war, it weakened the British, but did not bring any results. On 10 days after the US joined the war, one of the most important battles of the Western Front will take place, namely the same attempt by the Entente countries to attack the German defense line. By April, the Allies had concentrated significant military resources to conduct an offensive operation. The total number of Allied troops on the Western Front was about 3.9 million against 2.5 million German troops. Since April, the Entente led a major offensive against the German defense line, which continued until the end of April till beginning of May. After taking 2 lines of defense, the offensive was stopped due to low effectiveness and large losses. Allied losses amounted to over 200,000 people. The unsuccessful offensive undermined the morale of the French army, and because of this, mutinies began. But the soldiers heeded the calls for patriotism and a sense of civic duty and returned to defensive positions. However, they refused to go on the attack. After all, it was suicide. A wave of public indignation arose in France itself, and on May 15th, Nivelle was replaced as commander-in-chief by Henri Pétain. After that, the Entente tried many times to break through the German fortifications, but it was the same. However, on June 25th, the first US military units began to arrive in France. Their influence on military operations from 1917 to early 1918 was insignificant due to the small number of troops. In March, there were only 85,000 American troops in France, but by September, their number reached 1.2 million. By the end of the year, the British decided to try to win another major battle for the city of Cambrai. On November 20th, British troops launched the first massive attack in history using tank units. 324 tanks took part in the attack. The lack of artillery preparation as a deceptive move, superiority in forces and means, led to the rapid progress of the attack. The British advanced a long distance in 6 hours. However, as a result of a rapid attack, the infantry fell behind and the tanks advanced far forward, suffering some serious losses. The German army launched a sudden counterattack, pushing the Allied forces back to their original lines. Despite repelling the attack, tanks proved their effectiveness in battle, and the battle itself marked the beginning of the widespread use of tanks as well as the development of anti-tank defense. The year was almost ending, but because of the ongoing terrible war, this time no one came out of the trenches to wish each other a Merry Christmas. Around that time, the German General Staff actually had some good news, namely the end of the war with the Russian Empire, or well, with Soviet Russia. After signing of the Brest-Litovsk peace treaty with Soviet Russia on March 3, 1918, and its withdrawal from the war on the Eastern Front, many divisions were freed up and then were transferred to the Western Front. Having created an advantage on the Western Front with the new forces and means, the number of German troops increased by 570,000, and so the German command decided to go on an offensive with the aim to defeat the Entente before the United States could expand its intervention in Europe. According to Ludendorff's plan, German troops were supposed to launch an offensive in the area of the city of Amiens and cut off British troops from the French, pushing them to the shore of the North Sea. After the transfer of all troops and the reorganization, the German Empire decided to make its last move to launch the largest offensive of the entire war. The first German offensive began on March 21st. Superiority in forces allowed German troops to advance 60 kilometers in the first 8 days of fighting. In response, the Allies brought reserve troops into battle and by April drove back the German troops, inflicting 230,000 casualties on them. On April 14th, Ferdinand Foch was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied forces, which allowed for better coordination of action of both the British and the French armies. Each time, the initially successful progression of attacks by German troops ended in failure, and despite having advanced several tens of kilometers, they could not overcome the Allied defenses. In July, the last offensive of the German troops began again on the Marne River. The troops crossed the river but were able to only slightly advance. On July 17th, the Allied forces stopped on the advance of the German armies and the next day launched a counteroffensive, pushing the Germans back to their original positions. After this, the Amiens Operation was launched by the joint forces of the British, American, and French. Having gained an advantage over the German troops, the Allies launched a general offensive along the entire front from Verdun to the North Sea. Exhausted by the 4-year war, many German troops began to surrender. In October, Ludendorff was replaced in his post by Wilhelm Groener. As a result of the offensive, by November, the front line was pushed inland by 80 kilometers, all the way to the border with Belgium. The people of Germany, as well as the General Staff, were completely desperate as they knew the war would be lost sooner or later, because all attempts were in vain. Because of this, in November, a revolution took place in Germany, during which the monarchy was overthrown and the Weimar Republic was proclaimed. A new government, the Council of People's Representatives, came to power. The new government of Germany understood its desperate position, and at last, on November 11th, a day after its election, the Compiègne Truce was signed. Its terms were the immediate end of all hostilities with the withdrawal of German troops from the occupied territories and the creation of a demilitarized zone on the right bank of the Rhine. The war on the Western Front was over. The Allied victory over Germany on the Western Front determined the leading role of Great Britain, France, and the United States in developing the terms of peace agreements at the Paris Peace Conference. On June 28, 1990, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. This is the end of the Great War, which lasted for 4 years. 10 million deaths, the collapse of several empires, and the promise to never fight such a war ever again. However, who knew if this peace would last? If you want to join the filming or just chat, join my Discord server. Thanks for watching and goodbye.